Hey everyone, Hans here. Hope you are doing well. Today I'm gonna make a video in a video before I made a request to all if you want me to talk about individuality and collectivism, my thoughts on it. Uh, that if asked, I would make a video about it, or requested, I should say, not asked. So Simons has done so, I'm gonna do that, and I appreciate that. It tells me that the people who are heeding my videos are actually listening too. That's always a nice bonus, isn't it? So I appreciate that, buddy. And I hope I can cover it all in half an hour. You know, most people need like 2 hours at least, so I'll see what I can do. But my take on individualism and collectivism, it's drawn from two main sources. That word, sources. From in the beginning, let's say, when I first got more public, I really had a detest for individualism because I considered it no more than a byword for egotism, self-serving, but the negative sort, if you will. Selfishness, but the negative kind. The kind where basically you have evil people who are hogging all the money for themselves, or stealing land, or they're just messing with other people's lives, and it gives them a lot of joy, because it makes them feel powerful and all of that. And that is how I have looked at it for the longest time. But then I got thrown in to I didn't get thrown in. I walked into the white positive sphere and I saw a lot of people who were collectivists. And I got to say, believe it or not, I did not care for that either. And it sounds strange because, at first, collectivism, it seems like, okay, you're working in a collective, you're working together in a group, meaning you are all, building on the same thing, if you will, group work. And in my opinion, man is a group creature. Let's just go with that for now. Man works in groups. But then I run into the types who want you to walk in uniforms, and I quickly see see these evil types sneaking in the white positive sphere, and they just can't wait to reinvigorate old systems that have failed us. And it always comes down to be as little of yourself as possible and just fall in line with, and guess what, these same people who want that collectivism, they also want to be the leaders. Isn't that convenient? Isn't that, well, it's not a coincidence, and it's convenient for them, right? If people then are desperate enough to join in. Not everyone who joins in such does it because they love the idea of having a uniform. They just do it because they think that only makes sense, and I was one of those. So it's really a language problem that I realized for me, because I ended up disliking, the both sides of the dichotomy. So what was I left with then? I gave it some thought, realized it's a false dichotomy. You need both. And that's my current take anyways. I ran into people who really analyze the language, who are looking into the philosophers of old, garnered what I wanted from them. I should say wanted. I take what I think is good and I leave what I think is bad. And you know this in me, I say this all the time, like do that with my videos. I think that is the fairest way and the healthiest for everyone. But the philosophers, maybe if I could be wrong, but I think since Aristotle there is a more individualistic streak in philosophers in the West, and that is in and of itself fine. The way how they go about it is that sort of individualism they're talking about. Yeah, you're thinking about yourself, but it's more so in preparation of dealing with the external world. It's not individualism versus collective alone. There is part of that, but it's more so being yourself versus falling in line with the will of others, and basically letting your own will be negated. That is unhealthy. You need both, I've come to realize. And on the other side of that, actually, as far as collectivism is concerned, nothing really changed. In the sense of I didn't find anything beyond walk in line, march in the streets, and be the tough little soldier or whatever the hell it's gonna be. So that's actually kind of stagnant, which is actually pretty alarming. But I have my own take on that as well. Maybe it's a step forward to look at collectivism. So individualism to begin with, as I see it, and collectivism being a false dichotomy. I have to say that when it comes down to it, both sides have a good merit to it, but it's the way how it's done. Individualism in the sense of you're preparing your internal self to deal with the external world, or maybe not even deal, but at the very least you're strengthening your soul, you're strengthening your being, you're developing your own being, your character, your personality, your soul brightens when you do that. How that's done is a bit by the wayside in this conversation, but it's done by facing your fears, facing your frailties, and it's not so much about killing your shadow as understanding it's there and working together with it. For that I can always make a separate video too. But as you're doing that, there is merit to the saying, and this is from Jason Kerner that I heard it. It could be others that came up with it before, but I got it from him. Is in a world full of collectives, individualism is suicide. And that makes perfect sense. Even a lot of these philosophers do not really have an answer for that. They just figure that if everyone builds on himself, capital S self, or herself of course, then there won't be a need for all of this nasty collectivism, but by which they of course speak about this uniformity that people march by, which is unnatural, it's artificial. Coming back to artificial hierarchies and natural hierarchies, right? Which is something that comes from me, Can feel a bit good about myself. But yeah, so artificial hierarchy, that is to say man-made, and not so much to do with nature. Natural hierarchy is just, but I'm not gonna go into that. There is another video that I have about that, and I suppose look it up. So, where was I? So yeah, collectivism is a necessity to survive in the world today. Because there are people who will band together, they will don those uniforms, and they'll trample all over those who have chosen to be individualistic. Not that difficult. It's just look at what shall one call it? Oh yeah, just look at every instance where a gang takes over a town, if you will. That's usually only because the town isn't cohesive as a collective, as a group. They're not willing to protect each other because they're too afraid of being hurt by the gang. So they just pay the gang off or whatever it's gonna be, and then the gang is of course gonna get stronger. So in the very material sense, collectivism is gonna win. And I think we see that on a large scale in history too. It's the ones who got together, donned their pretty little uniforms or whatever it was going to be. They had the most success. Still having so, as far as I can tell. In a material sense, not in the spiritual. The spiritual sense, the individualist, in the sense of how the philosophers look at it, definitely on top. Because they have very strong minds. Like some of these philosophers, they ended up in stockades. Their books got burned by the masses and what have you, and their work destroyed. They barely have a legacy left. Like, how many thousands of philosophers will we never know about because every last scrap of their works was burned after they got killed by by this mob, if you will. That is something that needs addressing, right? So what then do you do? And here I have my take on collectivism. That is, I've not heard talk about it in any other way, only in the vaguest sense. Tribalism. So you work together based on the basis of you come from the same heritage, and you have the same culture. You have this, well, yes, share the same biospirit, and that's the spirit that even binds the individualists with everyone else, whether they like that or not. That's by the wayside. But the way how I think tribes used to be formed back in the day, it's more than just families sticking together. Naturally, like through the existential bond that man has with direct family members, capital M man, you're bound to stick with your mom and dad for the rest of your life. Unless you maybe just really are that sort of a free bird who needs to be a lone wolf who needs to be by himself and all of that. But those are exceptions, really. And let's just take a Stone Age example. There are wild animals that you need to beware of, and you need your buddies to chase it off. You can do that in two ways. You can, all have the exact same spear, and you can have the exact same leopard skin that you're using as your uniform or what have you. It's like the trials you're put on are, that you go out and go get yourself your uniform from the wilds, if you will. The good old days. Or you can decide to let it be natural, because that former one is more artificial, even though it's very close to nature still. You can look at the different qualities of every person in the tribe. Natural. What does that mean? Is that you're gonna have guys who are taller, and you're gonna have guys who are physically shorter. That's a very simple example, I know. But what then if you understand you have to work together to have that basic material survival ability as a group? You give your tall guys a spear and your shorter guys get a club. And the whole point then is when they see an animal come running, let's say a cave bear runs for them, tries to run off with a child or something, then these guys know that the tall dudes will all grab their spear, and the shorter guys will grab the club, and they know that the taller guys will be stabbing away at the bear, while the shorter guys are like moving back and forth and who knows where, kind of like bees a little bit, and just whack the shit out of that bear. That looks like it also is uniform, but the difference is that in that sense you could say you're looking at personal traits. The reason that I only use two traits is what makes it still look uniform. Maybe I should go that extra step then and say, okay, and some of these shorter guys, some of them will be very stocky and broad, and others will be very lean and can run. And the stocky guys, you give them the club, but the leaner dudes, like they have their stone knives now or whatever it's gonna be, or maybe you have like that short guy with his spear who's just that quick and that good with it. It looks a little bit more chaotic, but the whole point of what I'm trying to say is you look at the individual capacities, experience, abilities of every single separate man in that instance, or woman, I guess. Although predominantly it would be men. I mean, let's be serious here. That's where collectivism can go right, because then it can still respect their individual capacities. Hence also that I'll speak about a physical example, but also on a spiritual basis, then you can leave room for that as well. I think that is as what white man serves him best. You understand that you have to work together, but at the same time You leave each other the space required to you leave each other the space required to be themselves, and that is absolutely possible. Then it just becomes, then just the philosophy comes into play of like how much do I focus on myself, and how much do I focus on the tribe's survival in general, which is your own survival anyways. And that's a balancing act, and that is again, that comes, it's leaning more into the individual realm where you kind of have to figure it out for yourself. Although then again, maybe that's why our ancestors had something called the thing, which is a sort of council. What if that is not only between different tribes, but what if it's that within a singular tribe, where all the members come together, or all the participants, I should say, of the tribe come together, and they decide on, the free man. Okay, guys, we're gonna focus a bit more on meditation this year, so we're gonna have a bit less training in the playing ground or what have you when it comes to how to deal with wild animals. I mean, I'm just throwing examples at you, but I think you get the point. And if not, just let me know in the comment section and I might get deeper into it. So yeah. And then, you're just gonna have to be honorable and live with the consequences of your decision as a group and as an individual. That is one of them. That is how I would describe honor. Dealing with the consequences of your actions, accepting them, for ill or for better. I think I got the main point across. How it then isn't a dichotomy between one or the other. It's just about how do you deal with it. Because one sort of individualism, it is just, it's that dark selfishness where they only look at their personal wealth and their personal gain. Basically their personal gain, let's put it like that. And then on the other side you have like the dark collectivism that's only about putting people in a natural state where they are robots and they will obey the orders given to them, which is to great pleasure of evil people who get into positions of power, by the way. Contrary to the individualism that is about self-growth, but then working in tandem with the collectivism that is about looking at who is good at what and who is crappy at what, and taking it in consideration. You see also how those two work together. If you have an entire tribe, let's say, of people who just do not know how to wield a spear, that individualism might just give them the opportunity to improve themselves in that field, right? And then they can give each other their tricks, and in a few years, in a few decades, in a generation or two, like the tribe has capable spearmen, whatever it's gonna be. And then they'll have far less issues with a hostile environment, if there happens to be one they're living in, or hostile elements within the environment. That's a better way of putting it, because nature also has a lot of good in it, obviously. There was another point I wanted to attach to this, trying to think of it again. So speaking about looking at the self, working in tandem with the group, and vice versa. Oh yeah, and there is something else that tribal movements betray. No, that's not really the best word, I guess, but a tribe back in the day. I could name you, I don't actually know how many tribes I still remember. I actually used to, personal study, I used to look into how many tribes actually were around, and there's quite a few of them. A lot of these tribes vanished, but you know that isn't necessarily through violence. It's actually because the people in the tribe just decided, the purpose of the tribe is fulfilled. Isn't that interesting concept? So let's say you have tribe blue, green, yellow and red. Just go with these colors because that's the easiest way I can put it for now. They have their annual meeting ground. And it's for the rest of the year they're like hunting or they're living in their own spot or whatever it's going to be. But they have their meeting grounds. What happens on these meeting grounds? They celebrate. They come together during holidays, and they're they're letting their children hang out with their peers of their same age ranges, and couples are being formed. There is talk about what is going to be necessary to survive in the next year. What kind of tribes do we need? Do we need warrior tribes? Do we need hunting tribes? Do we need these sort of things? And again, fake, not fake, but I'm using it very simplistic. I know. That's just to keep it simple, I guess. So let's say that tribe green has a lot of daughters, and the daughters are married into tribe red, for example. Okay, what does that look like? Well, some sons of tribe red are gonna stick with tribe green, and some daughters of tribe green are gonna stick with tribe red, and those new tribes are sort of formed, and then they go on their merry way again. That's, by the way, also how you prevent inbreeding, which is something that a lot of disgusting people seem to insist that people in the Stone Age did for some reason. It's like, no, they did not, because then we would have gone extinct due to all the sort of genetic diseases and who knows what. Throwing that in there real quick. And yeah, then the purpose of the tribe, which in and of itself could be causes that people join or leave. You could say, yeah, let's go with the hunting tribe. Okay, so the hunting tribe, what it basically means is you raise your banner, if you will, or whatever it is, your totem, and you say, all who come with me under this totem understand that we're gonna go to the south or what have you, and we're gonna spend the entire season, we're gonna spend it on hunting deer or boar, what have you. Okay? With the warrior tribe, it's something along the lines of join under this totem, this flag, join under this chieftain, go along with them, and we'll work it out along the way. There is an invasive tribe coming from who knows where. I'm gonna have to fight them off, so we're gonna spend the season duking it out with them. Best man win and all of that. Those sort of things. But then you understand that once the hunting is done, or once the fighting is done, these tribes do not necessarily need to exist anymore. It could be if an event escalates, or you need to hunt for several years, or it just never stops. But even then, people will join and leave and what have you for their personal reasons. You see then how collectivism and individualism work hand in hand, at least among our race. Other races, how they do it, it's really none of my concerns. I'm indifferent to that. I have to look at my own people. That's a task in and of itself already, a lifetime's worth. I think everyone who listens to my videos can appreciate that. And who can't appreciate that, well, tough. Tough, go on your way. I have no interest in your presence either. Anyone else is welcome as always, of course. And I think that's the best how I can lay out how individualism and collectivism is supposed to work together. It's not different, it's not supposed to be combative with one another. And I think the ones who are picking those sides on either way might actually just be on purpose, creating false dichotomies for people to fight over. Whereas now, if you just think about it for a minute, you might actually come together and realize, oh, okay, it's like politics is the best example, with right wing and left wing. Like both sides have things that the voters on either side dislike and like, and usually when you really look into it, with the right wing and the left wing, they actually like the same things, but in varying degrees. Your right wingers are a little bit more, I suppose, a little bit more masculine, Yeah, I think that's a fair way of looking at it, but be careful because that's not always the case. And with lefties, it's the opposite. Of course, these days it's absolutely mental, but in its original somewhat state, it's like the man and the woman that ought to work together. But we live in generations that have been trained where man and woman are supposed to hate each other, which is again a false dichotomy. It's again a greater whole. Yeah, by which I only mean to say that there's a lot of traps out there, and unfortunately we have allowed ourselves to fall into it. Doesn't mean we need to slap ourselves for it, just means that we need to realize, okay, we fell for it, we made that mistake, we're rejecting, we're getting out of that mess, we're getting out of that swamp of pointless fights. Maybe fight something. Maybe find something to really fight for. A better tomorrow. That sounds pretty good. Rather than one trying to climb on top of the other endlessly until nobody is left. Because that's going to be the end result with these artificial hierarchies and false dichotomies. But yeah. Oh, I actually managed in half an hour. Well, in the simple way as I can. Yeah, it's a bit of both, and that's fine. Nobody's. I'm not saying it's easy. Who says it's easy? But it's doable. We can accomplish that. You can accomplish that. I can accomplish that. And you do not need to like everyone as much, or that's to say, when it comes to either of so, you do not necessarily need to like someone else, but you can still work together with them, whether you like or dislike them. But at this point, those who prefer, sticking with the politics aspect, those who prefer the masculine and those who prefer the feminine, yeah, there's always going to be these individuals who do not like masculinity or femininity either way. But if you understand that that it's a false dichotomy you're put in, you might be more inclined to at least, even if it's a little mopey and disgruntled, you'll work together because you need each other. And then hopefully you can teach the next generation to work towards that. And yeah, I don't think I have much else to add to that. Yeah, it's fine. Maybe one more point that I was thinking about. Have you ever been walking in the woods and wonder to yourself, how many times have my ancestors been here before? Or maybe just look at a place in Europe or in Russia and you figure, did my great granny of generations ago, make a tour there in her chariot? It's a bit, by the way. It's not part of this topic at all. I just was musing on it on my way here, and fills me with a little bit of melancholy and sadness, but at the same time, it's also uplifting and it's bittersweet. Yeah, it's a bittersweet thought. Because that's the final addition, I suppose, to the collectivism and individualism is the philosopher will say that the external world cannot touch you. I disagree with that, obviously, because in the collective, if you then look at it from the collective side, no. The external world will absolutely, even if in your own mind you're strong enough to take it, the external world can still influence your lineage, can influence your life in a way that is unacceptable in a moral sense. And the final part that I would add to that is nature. In the natural environment, because the urban environment is artificial. It truly is, and look at what it breeds. Look at the people who have grown up in that for generations, what happens to them. And how they treat their own kinsmen who live in the outdoors. How they treat themselves. Anyways, my time is up for now. I'm gonna leave you all with those thoughts, and you'll have a good one, and bye bye.